Hi everyone, my name's Katie. Welcome to my channel Chords Records 1975. 50 years ago, what a year. Going through all the albums I have from 1975, it clearly was a high point in my musical taste life, and I'm going to take you through 10 with a bonus 11th at the end. But there were so many, so I know that a lot of you will probably go, what about this? What about this? Like Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks, Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run, Fleetwood Mac. Oh, so many. There are so many that I probably halfway through the year might do a part two, maybe even a part three at the end of the year. I might do it in thirds. But this is my first video of the new year, so Happy New Year to you all. I hope you've had a great one and remained safe and well, but partied hard, listening to great music. So without further ado, here are my 10 of my favorite albums that were released in 1975. So this isn't the greatest, this isn't the best, but I think these 10 are really amazing. And I hope you do too. Let me know below if there are any hidden gems from 1975 that you'd like to recommend to me, because one of the greatest gifts of this channel is the amazing wisdom that you guys are providing for me. And I've got a little book which I write down all these recommendations, and when I go to markets and stuff, I'm looking out for them. So please keep that up. All right, coming in with the heavy hitter, 1975, the Bee Gees released Main Course. What an incredible album this is. And fun fact about this album, this was the first time that they introduced this new logo design that they had specially designed, which they used for a long time. And this is, I love this cover, this very Art Deco, Art Nouveau even, probably Art Nouveau cover. Main Course, Bee Gees, 1975. This was like their 12th or 13th album I think. And it was the first time that they really went into and leaned into their soul and funk era. So they moved away from their very harmony, ballady, almost folk type music, which is great. And this was the prelude or even the very beginning of their disco era, very soul funk. So the songs on, I'll just show you, in most cases I've got the original 1975 pressings, but from Australia. So this one is from Australia, 1975. But the actual songs on this album include Jive Talking, just such a brilliant, Nights on Broadway, it's almost like a greatest hits, Songbird, Fanny, Be Tender With My Love, Baby As You Turn Away closes out this album. It's just an absolutely stunning album, and I'm lucky enough to have a very clean copy, so it plays beautifully. I love this album. Great album from 1975. And then following on with probably one of the greatest albums from 1975, if not of all time, is Queen, Night at the Opera. This year, God, can you imagine being in a record store in 1975? Mazzy, calling out you. Were you working in records in 1975? Were you in a records? My God, it would have been an incredible year. I was probably, how old would have I been? 9 maybe. So I was lucky enough that some of my original albums were played on my parents' stereo, and they had a really good stereo, so they're not ruined, which I'm very lucky about. So this is my original 1975 Australian copy of this incredible album. So I'll just show you the label here, the Electra Butterfly label. This album, of course, came, if you know the history of Queen, that they had been ripped off by their earlier 3 albums. I think this was their 4th album. And so they decided to record in a whole bunch of different studios, change the way they operated and change their management, etc., I think is the way it went. But this album, phenomenal. 2 of the greatest songs ever. Of course, the masterpiece that is Bohemian Rhapsody is on this album, and that alone should make you want to have it in your collection if you don't. I mean, who doesn't have this album? But the other great song on this album, which I Honestly, it's love of my life. It's heartbreaking. It's such a beautiful, beautiful song. Oh, there's so many great songs on here. I'm in love with my car. Oh gosh. So this is a gatefold. Sorry, I was distracted there by how beautiful this album is. I've got a really clean copy of this, an Australian original. So that's 1975. What a great year. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to show you one you may not know. So I'm going to show you this self-titled debut album by a guy called Andrew Gold. Just pause here and let you consider if you know who he is. If you're a music person, you probably do know. Andrew Gold was a multi-instrumentalist who played a lot on early 70s Linda Ronstadt, for example, albums. He was this really incredible musician and songwriter. And this was his debut album after having played in those bands, and he was still playing in Linda Ronstadt's band at this time. He released this debut album. Now, I picked this up in a dollar bin near Sydney in Australia a few years ago, and I bought it because I thought that he kind of looks like a folky, not yacht rock. I hate that term at the moment because of the documentary. I think it's undervaluing some great musicians, but it looks a bit hokey. But I thought, this is interesting. I'm going to have a look. And what really drew me to it was there is a song on here which you will all know called Love Hurts. So the great duet between Graham Parsons and Emmylou Harris, which in turn was a cover. He sings it with Linda Ronstadt on here. 1975, so it's 2 years after Graham Parsons' Grievous Angel with Love Hurts comes out, and it is such a beautiful recording. This whole album is beautiful. It was mastered by Doug Sachs from the Mastering Lab. Asylum. I highly recommend it. It's very beautifully recorded. He's a multi-instrumentalist, so he knows all the instruments, and it's got all the regulars that you see on Linda Ronstadt albums like Kenny Edwards, etc. But it's such a treat of an album. I couldn't believe it when I brought it home and put it on. I've got it in my original Asylum sleeve there. All right. The next 1975 album, so I'm calling this this is a little kind of collection, these ones. So it's connected to the Andrew Gold. So at the time, Andrew Gold was in Linda Ronstadt's band. And Linda Ronstadt released Prisoner in Disguise in 1975. I've got this gatefold here. This is my original Australian, also on Asylum. Show you the label there. This album it's the follow-up to Heart Like a Wheel. Obviously, up to that point, it had been her greatest album. And this is such a beautiful album. Of course, features Andrew Gold, but it also features James Taylor, Lowell George from Little Feat, David Crosby, Graham Nash, so a bunch of her friends, even Kate McGarrigle from Kate and Anna McGarrigle, the McGarrigle sisters, Rufus Wainwright's mum and aunt. Beautiful, beautiful album. The songs on here you'd know are Tracks of My Tears, that features Andrew Gold, Heatwave, fantastic cover of that early kind of rock and roll song from a female band, can't recall at the moment. Many Rivers to Cross, that classic folk song. The Sweetest Gift, the Dolly Parton cover. That The Sweetest Gift is, no, not the Dolly Parton cover. The Sweetest Gift was a duet with Emmylou Harris. They were all hanging out together. Would have been such an amazing time. There's a beautiful version of Dolly Parton's I Will Always Love You on here. It's such a great album. Anyway, Prisoner in Disguise. But speaking about Emmylou Harris, 1975 was her big sort of year of sort of coming out into the mainstream. Of course, she'd had an early album in the early 70s, and then she met Graham Parsons, and of course they really recorded Grievous Angel together, and they were very, very dear friends. And after his passing and after her grieving, in 1975, she recorded 2 albums and released 2 albums. And they're really these love letters, I think, to Gram Parsons. That's how I like to think of them. The first one, I'm doing these 2 together as my number 5. But the first one, Pieces of the Sky, this was my VMP release. Really great release. If you want to hear a fresh recording of Emmylou Harris that's not all scratched up, this is a really good one to get. But the one I want to feature, so that one was absolutely brilliant, and that was kind of her, almost considered her debut, and it really was her love letter to Gram Parsons. But her follow-up towards the end of the year, same year, 1975, was this Elite Hotel. And I absolutely love this album, and I possibly think it's the better album, but yeah, you tell me what you think, what you prefer. Look at that cover, so cool. This copy of mine is my Australian original on reprise. So this album has the most beautiful track beginning side 2, the cover of the Beatles, Here, There and Everywhere. It is just heartbreaking. You can hear the heartbreak in her voice when she's singing it, and I prefer this version to the Beatles. The Beatles, for me, singing that song, even though they wrote it, it's a little bit, they're trying to harmonize and they're trying to be lyrical, but it's very kind of rhythmic and beautiful, but perfect. This is imperfect. It's haunting. It's stunning. I love this version of this song. But you know, she had all her friends. She was either covering or featuring her friends on here. Everyone from Hank Williams, Gram Parsons obviously has written a song, and she covered one of his songs. Buck Owens. Yeah, it's just a masterful album. So I suggest, I don't think it was this super huge hit, to be honest. It wasn't the hit that Pieces of the Sky was, but it certainly made the Billboard charts. And she actually won the best Grammy. She won the Grammy for the best country vocal performance female for this album. Right, on to what this is one I have shown recently, I think. I'm a massive Split Enz fan from New Zealand. And this is pre-Neil Finn. This is Tim Finn. This is the original band. Mental Notes on Festival. My original copy, Mushroom copy. So Tim Finn, Philip Judd, Jonathan Chun, Wally Wilkinson, Noel Crombie, Eddie Rayner, and Emlyn Crowther, some of whom are no longer with us. But this is psych rock, early New Zealand psych rock. The best track on here, in my humble opinion, is Time for a Change, track 2, side 2. I played that to death. It's a long song. It's such a beautiful ballad, but it's psych rock ballady. Stranger Than Fiction, it was quite a famous one. So I would highly suggest streaming this. If you don't know it, you'll be surprised. Beautifully recorded. Show you the gatefold. Gorgeous artwork. Don't know if you can see it all in the vision. Graham Webber was the artist for that. Okay, and how good was 1975? I mean, when you've got someone like Patti Smith releasing her debut album with a photograph by Robert Mapplethorpe. I showed this in a recent video. This is my Voices of America release from Dylan from Noble Records. So original 1975, I think it's the Peter Pan Press. Oh my goodness, what can I say about Patti Smith? I mean, you'll know she's the big song from here, Gloria, the Van Morrison song, she covers that. This is such an iconic album. It should be in anyone's 70s rock collection. It's one of the great female rock albums, I think, in history. And she continues to produce amazing music. But recorded in 1975, it just gets better and better. This one, it was from Arista. Let me show you the label here. As I said, it's from the Voice of America collection. Who is in her band here? Richard Soules on piano, Lenny Kaye lead guitar. He's still playing with her to this day. Unbelievable, 50 years later. Ivan Crowell and J.D. Doherty on drums. All right, okay, the next one. 1975. God, does it get any better with Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy? The amazing concept album by Elton John and Bernie Taupin, where they go back into the 60s and do a chronological writing album about those early years before they made it. And Bernie Taupin has said they wrote it kind of chronologically about those early years, and so it's a whole concept album. The beautiful song "Someone Saved My Life Tonight" about his ill-fated engagement to a woman and his suicide attempt is just one of the great saddest songs, isn't it? It's just so beautiful. This is not my original. I haven't got an original. I haven't been able to find a good enough copy. Oh, I wish I could. I just love this album so much. I love the artwork. I love the idea about going back, two writers going back into their beginning, and even when they're quite young, they have the wherewithal to go back and recognise how to poetically write about their earlier youth. I just think it's a sign of a true artist that can do that. You don't have to wait till you're really old to look back at those times. You can be self-aware enough when you're young to kind of look back at your teenage years and go, oh, that was interesting, and write poetry about it and write music. So I think this is a really brilliant album, great concept album. So the next one is one of my all-time favourite artists, Joni Mitchell, with one of my all-time favourite Joni Mitchell albums, The Hissing of Summer Lawns. I mean, I love that title alone. I've talked about this in my Best Joni Mitchell Albums video, which I might link below actually. But this album was the follow-up to Court and Spark, and it was the follow-up to where she's really getting into jazz. So it's almost a jazz fusion type album, very jazz influenced. A couple of fun things about this album, particularly the album cover. See that little blue house there? That's her house, and their whole album is a statement on kind of what would you call it? It's kind of her approach to the patriarchal society, and I guess they're represented by the men carrying the big snake in the city, and kind of living in that world. The other really fun thing about this album, which I did mention in that video, but I'll let you know, is, because I think it's just remarkable, Joni Mitchell is the person who has been credited with the very first commercial sample in an album. And it was on this track that featured this African drum ensemble. And the actual song is called The Jungle Line. And it's got these amazing sampled drums that she loops. So worth just jumping off and having a quick stream of that if you're interested. But this was released in 1975, one of the great Joni Mitchell albums, and highly recommend this if you've heard the early ones, Blue, and you want to sort of get a little bit more experimental. Brilliant album. That one is my Australian original. Okay, now... this album's pretty special to me, and tell me in the comments below if you know this album, and I will be really surprised if any of you know it. But there are no prizes, but I'll be very surprised. I've got very few Australian viewers, but the Australians may know it. This was my very first album I ever owned myself. And it's the great Australian rock band from the 70s, Sherbet, with Daryl Braithwaite, and it's in concert. So it's their live album, recorded late 1974 and released in 1975. Released on Festival. And this is my original album on the Infinity label, released by Festival. And it plays beautifully because I was young, I was 9, say. I was playing it on my parents' stereo, It's got a little bit of ring wear I can see there in the video, but I looked after my albums, and so very happy to still have this, and very happy to feature it in this video. Tell me if you know it. Sherbet. You know some of their songs, but the first song, Cassandra, was always a hit in our house because my sister's name's Cassandra. We call her Cassie for short, but I loved that. So, yes, brilliant, brilliant album, and a great guy, Daryl Braithwaite. All right, that was my 10th album. My bonus album is a compilation, but I'm featuring it because it is iconic in the history of Australian music that's been released. Not Australian music, but music that has been released in Australia. This album was was number 1 for 18 weeks in Australia, and 16 weeks in Australia and 18 weeks in New Zealand. And in fact, in New Zealand, it's the second biggest album still of all time, selling album of all time, second to Dire Straits. And that album, released in 1975, is the best of ABBA. Nearly every Australian kid had this album. It was, if you're familiar with the success of ABBA, that probably their biggest market was Australia when they broke. Like Australian, New Zealand loved them. They absolutely loved them. And this album was released in the Netherlands first, and then second in Australia. And it was a gold album before it was even released, and then it was 18 times platinum. And it's just an iconic album in the history of 70s Australian releases. Now, you may laugh, but you put this on, and I challenge you not to tap your foot. It is so great. This is my original RCA. This is my copy. And like the first song starts off with Waterloo, Ring Ring, Honey Honey, Mamma Mia. It just goes on, and it was such a great album. Again, really good condition for me because of my parents' stereo. So that's a compilation, but I thought I should feature it. 1975 that came out, and how kind of different. No one's ever been able to replicate their sound. It was just an incredible band. And so that finishes off my 1975. Let's call it part 1, because I'm pretty sure I may do a part 2. So as I said, pop your comments in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.